back to the Horror Master YouTube channel. Welcome back to day 5 of my 31 Days of Horror series, where I rank 8 horror movie franchises films from the worst to the best. And since we are on day 5, if you have not yet been able to see my latest videos, I highly suggest y'all to go back in them and watch it because this was really fun. This series has been a lot of fun, and we're just getting started. Like, this is barely day 5, so stay tuned for the rest of the days. So for day 5, we are now doing the Conjuring Universe, not just the Conjuring films. We're doing the entire Conjuring universe. So the Conjuring is one of those brand new, quote unquote, brand new horror movie franchises that a lot of people kind of slept on them, and it's become a really successful franchise. Sure, this have had some good films, some bad films, hit and misses, but overall, in terms of a franchise, it's a really good franchise that I do suggest anybody to who's a huge horror fan or is even interested in the Conjuring universe to give it a watch. And I highly suggest all these movies. So, we have 8 films we're gonna talk about. So this is probably the biggest franchise we have done as of late. I think the Chucky films was close to maybe 6 or 7. I don't remember. So this is probably the biggest one that we have to yet to do. So let's get into the ranking model. So at number 8, at the bottom of the barrel, and I mean at the very bottom of the barrel, we have The Nun. Now I remember seeing this movie, actually going to theaters and watching The Nun. I was really hyped about The Nun because, of course, this was the story how Valak, was integrated into the Conjuring universe after watching The Conjuring 2, which I really did enjoy, which we later talk about on the list. But I was go oh, excuse me. Going into this, I was really hyped about it. The trailers looked good. It kind of seemed a bit like it will a lot of jump scares and all that. So I was really hyped about it. So I watched the film, and in terms of Conjuring films, and I guess sort of like this church and all that, it's really good. I mean, I'm not saying it's the best horror film of all time. I'm not saying it's the worst, but it's an enjoyable film. But in terms of the Conjuring universe, has to be the very bottom because there are some things that I kind of was like, what the hell they're doing? Like, for example, when the only way to, I guess, destroy or end Valak was to seal the seal with the blood of Christ, which that kind of was like a bit of left field. I never thought it was gonna be like something like that. I honestly didn't see that coming, but the jump scares were good. Of course, Valak getting in all her infamous scary glory. That was a pretty good um character in terms of horror characters. Has become probably one of the most synonymous in recent years. So I mean, and then of course we're gonna eventually gonna get the Nun too, which I'm really wondering how they're gonna pull it off. Either it's gonna be like another prequel to The Conjuring, what happens after the first Nun, or is it gonna be after the events of The Conjuring 2, maybe between The Conjuring 2 and The Conjuring that Devil Made Me Do It. So I'm kind of interested where they're gonna put that film. At number 7, we have The Curse of La Llorona. Now, if you all know me, you know I am I'm a Mexican American. I'm a Latino. So when this film was announced of Curse of La Llorona, of course it kind of stuck with me because La Llorona, the legend of La Llorona, is a Mexican urban legend. So going into this film, I was already like, this is gonna be a very interesting film. The only thing that kind of shocked me the most, and and I actually researched this, when the promotion for this film was being done, they never acknowledged that this film was in the Conjuring universe, which was a kind of a brilliant, but at the same time kind of backfired marketing way. But the only reason we were able to find out this film was in the Conjuring universe was because the same priest that came out in Annabelle made an appearance, and he talked about a possessed doll and some other elements of the Conjuring universe were in there. So kind of add the pieces together and kind of make it you know formulate it. So again, in the Conjuring universe, and again that heritage of Mexico for me kind of stuck with me because I remember as a kid hearing the legends, reading the legends. Of course, they've made so many TV shows, so many documentaries about La Llorona and the myth and all that. So I kind of like that they took a bit of my heritage into that and to make it into a film. Again, it wasn't really the best film. I think it did a bit better in the box office than the Nun, to be honest. But I don't remember. But you know, it I connected with the film again because of the mythology, that, and knowing, you know, the legend of La Llorona. So to me, it kind of really stuck to me. It stuck to me for a long time. And of course, if you've seen my one of my previous videos where I show one of my Funko Pops, I have the actual La Llorona Chase Funko Pop, which I really, y'all should check out that video as well. But again, another film that I do suggest anyone to watch it because it has its moments. At number six, we have Annabelle Comes Home. Now, this is probably what happened. This, in the timeline, if I remember correctly, this is in the timeline after the events of maybe part of The Conjuring, before The Conjuring happens, kind of around the same time. I don't remember the timeline really well. So basically, this is what happens when the Warrens bring Annabelle into their home, and of course Annabelle begins to kind of act up, and of course their daughter has the same gift as Lorraine, and of course she starts to see all this stuff. Annabelle becomes loose and all that, so a bit more jump scares, of course, them handling Annabelle. Again, I could be wrong with my timelines. I'm not sure if this takes place around the same time the first Conjuring or maybe after the Conjuring 2. Like I said, if someone knows, please let me down in the comments. I really don't remember, to be honest. It's been a while since these films, and rewatching them kind of sometimes makes me forget where this timeline is, because this timeline in the Conjuring universe is everywhere, which is one of those things that I really do give them credit, but sometimes confusing. More confusing than the MCU films, that's for sure. But the daughter has the same gift as Lorraine has, so she begins to see stuff, hear stuff, the same thing as her mother. Of course, she's the one who is battling Annabelle, what their parents are probably doing some other case, if I remember correctly. But another great film, like I said, all these Conjuring films are good. Some of them are way better, not some of them are not so much, but don't sleep on them because they're actually pretty good films. At number five, we have Annabelle. We actually have the first Annabelle film in terms of the three Annabelle films they've done in the Conjuring universe. Now, this is basically how Annabelle became an entity in the Conjuring universe after seeing her in the first Conjuring. Of course, we later found out there was going to be a spinoff of the Annabelle, kind of her origin story, even though the origin story is a bit later down in the film history, which we'll talk about in a bit. How about how, I guess, a killer's soul got trapped into the doll, even though that happened before, but that's another part of the story. And how the doll just began a reckoning of demonic possession, things moving things roaming around the house, and all that. Jump scares a bit better, but you know it's Annabelle, again, one of those weird characters that has lately become a kind of a horror icon. Not, I'm not saying it's up there to the likes of Freddy or Jason or Michael Myers, but in recent years it has become a really synonymous iconography in terms of horror. So, Annabelle, for what it is, it's a really good film. At number four, we have The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. This is the latest offering in the Conjuring universe, and probably the one of the few last Conjuring films. I'm not sure. I've heard rumors that they're gonna make a Conjuring 4, which I'm really interested in what they're gonna do with that. Because if you're kind of following the timeline, this happens maybe between, I want to say, in late 70s, maybe in the 80s. So they're going further down the timeline when the Warrens are, of course, they're aging. Of course, they can no longer be as young as they used to be. So depending on the timeline, but this was the first Conjuring film that, I think it was the only Conjuring film that was released straight to um streaming release, and I think also in theaters, because this was released during the pandemic, which kind of backfired because the studio didn't make a lot of money. Warner Brothers kind of jumped the gun, to be honest, in terms of this franchise. But I really enjoy this film, from the demonic position how it starts. and then thinking that it's over, then the boyfriend getting possessed and not really possessed, that it was somebody, a witch doing everything in the shadows, how the Warrens have to, destroy her altar that kind of controls, the actions of this young adult, and the killings, and taking his soul and offering to Satan. And it's an up and down journey that I really did enjoy. The devil made me do it. I wish I could have seen it in theaters. I unfortunately saw it in my comfort on my own house, even though it's my own house. But sometimes when it comes to these kind of films, I do like the cinematic feel to it when you're in the theater, the big speakers, eating your popcorn and all that, and just seeing a whole bunch of people being jump scared at the same time as you are. That's why I like to go into to the movies, a lot lately. So, I kind of missed that from The Conjuring. So, but overall, really great, amazing film. At number three, we have Annabelle Creation. Now, this is the story of how the Annabelle doll and eventually the demon who possesses this doll was able to connect into, or later the first Annabelle, and Annabelle, comes home. And also, the one thing I did like about this film that a lot of people didn't notice at first was the small pieces that they started to reference Balak, the nun that will let you get her own spin-off film and all that. How I just I mean, it's sad when this family loses their daughter, and the dad creates this one of a kind doll, which was supposed to be, I think, that was his job, to create one of a kind dolls. And of course, in the same day that her daughter unfortunately passed away of an accident. So I understand that grief of the parents, and of course, the home later becomes an orphanage for these girls. And one of these girls finds the Annabelle doll in this room filled with Bible passages and prayers and all that. So it kind of sets the mood on. And eventually we later find out that the same girl that eventually got the doll that kind of disappeared was the same girl from the first Annabelle who was doing the murders and later got killed. And the whole story of Annabelle, like, connection to the Conjuring Universe and all that, which again I really, really enjoy the living crap out of Annabelle Creation. It's kind of a weird film that a lot of people don't talk about, which I suggest y'all to watch it because it's a really interesting film. At number two, we have The Conjuring 2. This is the introduction of where we get the main villain of the film, Valak, aka the Nun. And the thing about the Nun, I mean, not the Nun, the Conjuring 2 that I liked was, they went to Great Britain. This is during the 70s, of course. The punk scene of the 70s, heavy metal was starting. I mean, in the UK, I mean, everything was probably bigger, better, badder, even before Texas and at the time of the 70s. But, in the UK, to have that story of how this family moves into this house, and the house is kind of, possessed by this elder man, or the crooked man, if I remember correctly. That's one of the also different characters in the film that, unfortunately, we later found out he was being manipulated by the nun, Valak, to do all these awful, awful things. And of course, we eventually found out the vision that Lorraine had in the first Conjuring, why she was so terrified. Eventually, she saw, you know, his husband's death, how he was going to die. So that kind of adds more into the lore of the Conjuring universe and all that. The exorcism from the little girl, it's probably up there in terms of, maybe one of my favorite exorcism films. I mean, I'm saying it's not like The Exorcist or The Exorcism Emily Rose level, or even The Last Exorcism, but it's probably top 10 exorcism films, which that might be on a list I might do eventually in down the road of maybe exorcism films, if you guys like to watch that. But The Conjuring 2, really great film. It kind of almost surpassed the original, but it almost by just by a bit. And of course, at number one, we have The Conjuring, the original Conjuring. Now, when this film was first released, a lot of people were saying this is the scariest film in the past 20 years. me being a big horror fan, I've always heard that this movie is the scariest film of all time and all that, and then I call it bullshit, and then I go see these films, and I still call it bullshit until this movie actually, you know, came out. I unfortunately didn't have the chance to see this film when it was released. I saw it probably a couple of months later in my local dollar movie theater. When back then, when there used to be a thing when you go, pay your ticket for $1, get your popcorn, and watch all these films that will eventually get released on DVD and streaming down the road. And again, this movie was still making it was breaking records. And the first time I actually saw The Conjuring, and it takes a lot for me, and maybe some other horror fans to actually get like jump scared and like scream and all that. This movie actually did give me some jump scares. I mean, especially the part where they're doing the exorcism, when they tie the mother up with the blanket and she's just bleeding from the covers, and of course Lorraine with her visions, which at the time, James Wan, which I forgot to mention, James Wan kind of revitalized the horror, franchise again. He did it with Saw at first, and then kind of helped the horror franchise to a different level, because at the time nothing like this was ever ever seen in film. I mean, of course, when you take the stories of Ed and Lorraine, Ed and Lorraine, actual detectives, actually paranormal activity detectives in real life, take those stories of those documentations and kind of put them into film. Of course, they dramatize a lot of the stuff and create this universe around it. I mean, that's for a reason. The Conjuring's, I'm not saying it's top 10 films, important films of all time. Maybe top 20 horror films of all time. Maybe top 30 horror films of all time, because it was a landmark film at the time. Nothing was ever like that before, and it's been a while since we've seen a horror film that has revitalized horror again. The only other example I can probably think about is probably the Terrorizer film, the first one. I have yet to see the second one. I hope it's good. Hopefully, whenever it happens, it kind of helps the shape of the horror again, because sometimes horror can get a little bit stale. With the Conjuring, it kind of gave it a new light to it. And that's it for this video, guys. I hope you guys really enjoy this rank 'em all. A bit of a longer video. Like I said, we have 8 films. So can you imagine me talking about like a Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, and then eventually the Halloween franchise? It's gonna be a bit of a longer video. So I hope you guys are really in. Stay tuned for those videos, because those videos will eventually be coming up. Tomorrow's video. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video, because tomorrow I'll be ranking the entire Insidious franchise. Another kind of franchise that kind of revolutionized and kind of refreshing the horror franchise, the horror genre, which I really did enjoy. So stay tuned for that video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do the usual shebangs. Follow me on my Instagram, follow me on my Twitter. And again, I hope you guys really enjoy this rank them all, this 31 Days of Horror franchise. I've been having a lot of fun doing this. And of course, stay safe. And until next time, stay metal.